do that. Cool. Thank you.
You get so yeah, I guess the best way to describe this is that Algolia is a search index, you know that. The way that Sorcery has things kind of put together is it's not like a faceted search. Everything lives in its own index,
Okay.
at least from what we can tell. So like contacts has an index, companies has an index. I want to say there's an events index. So like it doesn't like, there's not a good way to do a like global search, which is the reason why you see these two different, I guess, buttons up here. Is we're actually like we're changing indexes whenever we do this. And so it's I guess it could be good or bad depending on what you want, but like we was really going for a global search on this, much like this search bar up here. And so kind of what we get is whenever we type this in, we're just sending a search query to Algolia. And this kind of entire component here is, I want to say using, let me verify that real quick. Algolia's instant search, I think. Debound search, just an index search. Yeah, it's using Algolia's instant search JS, which is just like their like auto suggestion library. So like basically brings back a bunch of hits. So we build these out as individual components here. So like this whole search bar here is kind of a wrapper LWC, and then each individual result is its own LWC that just goes underneath the parent on there. And so what you can do is you can hit view in Salesforce. It should take you to the Salesforce record. So that was kind of the path that we wanted there, was be able to look at it in Salesforce, but also this open up in Sorcery is supposed to be changed to open in Crunchbase. But I think this overall implementation is pretty terrible, mainly because it's not a global search for one, and it's weird that we have two search bars, right?
Yeah.
And so, oh, good.
No, I agree. Yeah.
And so, kind of what I've been
confusing,
playing
I think, for me too. When
Yeah,
I first looked at it. Yeah.
Yeah, and so what I've been playing with is so hooking up Algolia through a federated search. And so this is what I've got going right now is I found Algolia's NPM uses Algolia. And so their API keys are just public since it's an open source project. So I hooked up an ngrok instance and got a local, very small Express server running that, gosh, here, let me change my screen real quick and I'll show you this too. Okay, you see VS Code?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is just a like really crappy Express server that I put up to try and just play with this. It's got suggest endpoint, results endpoint, open search XML. So have you done any like the federated search stuff on Salesforce?
Yeah, I have done some.
Okay, so do you know about like the open search XML spec and all that, or?
Yeah, it's been a while. I can't remember.
Gotcha. So yeah, this is my first like kind of jump into it.
Yeah.
And so we're putting together this open search here, declaring a new record type called library, giving it some fields in there, and then this is where we actually go out and get the results. And as you can see through this kind of Frankenstein template tag, we put together the XML that Salesforce wants to be able to see those results.
Got it.
So go back to Chrome. And so then when we go in here and we search for material. it actually brings back that library object there.
Mm-hmm.
And then if we go into here, we actually get multiple results for, like, these are just all npm packages that have material in them. I don't know what's going on there, but what I've been trying to figure out to accomplish what we want is like, we have this deal to where in the Algolia index, we have a lot of companies that aren't in Salesforce at all. So they don't help us by like searching on them right now. Like I want to say, if I do UI, if I bring one up, yeah. So like not in Salesforce, like that's in the Algolia index and it's in Sourcery, but it's not in Salesforce right now. So like we need to kind of provide a way for somebody to view information on this, and then also an easy way to put it into Salesforce, to where like kind of completes the whole like search circle, I guess. And so Open and Sourcery needs to go away. And the idea was to do Open and Crunchbase. And so what I was hoping is that we could get rid of this entire LWC here, move the search up to here. And if the cells, like, since the index, like Salesforce would already be searching companies that are in Salesforce, we could hit the Algolia index for companies that aren't in Salesforce. So that way we're not mixing results or duplicating results. And then if we could say like, hey, this is a Salesforce company, this is a company that's not in Salesforce, do an external redirect to Crunchbase would be awesome. And so like, whenever I click on material, if it would go to this, instead of opening up in Salesforce, since it's an external object that's not in Salesforce, like that's, I think, kind of the flow that we's looking for.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm just wondering, I kind of had obviously I just started, so I had like one conversation about this, but I've done similar things in the past, the different use case, but very similar, because you're trying to, also create an account. In this case, basically, it's also a company. So you want to search your data warehouse, and then you also want to search Salesforce, because, obviously sometimes you have data that's in the data warehouse and not Salesforce. So, but I guess one part that's in this whole, again, this is just my kind of take at the moment, is maybe slightly confusing to me, is like, is the end goal here for a user to use Salesforce to search for some data or for a record, but it doesn't really matter if the output is going to be in Salesforce or some other application? They just want to basically view it. The reason I'm asking is because there's a whole concept, like, let's say you want to create a new account. Now you're wondering, well, does this already exist in the data warehouse? Then that means that I want to pass those same search parameters to my data warehouse to see, is this company ABC here? If it's here, is the rule that I pull it from data warehouse, or does the user just create new company ABC? Because that's kind of, in my mind at least, kind of interconnected with this whole approach. Because does that make sense to you, or am I
no, I think it
explaining it well?
No, I think you're on the right track, and I think it's an either or on that. Like, I think they want to be able to, like, they obviously don't want duplicate companies. And so if a company exists in the Algolia index already, like, there's no reason, like, and I think they've had this happen before, where like duplicate records happen in Salesforce. And so they want to avoid that. But I think there's also this kind of like, is this a good company lead that I should bring into Salesforce? And so I think like, you kind of have this whole feeder going through to like, okay, new company gets added to Algolia as like, kind of like, hey, we should check this out. And then one of the partners or an associate checks out the actual companies, like, oh yeah, this needs to be added to Salesforce, or like, this is a stupid company, we don't need to touch them. So don't muck up Salesforce.
I understood. So they didn't want everything in Salesforce, just specific.
I think that they want everything to be in Salesforce that they want to be in Salesforce, but like have the option of finding, and this is my input just from like conversations with we and the rest of the team on me just trying to put this together. Like, if I'm in Salesforce and I'm searching for something and it's not in Salesforce, I want to be able to get to it from Salesforce. And so that's like
I
where
see.
hitting that, yeah, Algolia index for not Salesforce companies kind of comes in. One of the
Okay.
kind of like environmental flows that you probably aren't aware of. Have you ever heard of like the Chrome extension?
Which one?
So we have a custom Chrome extension that we put together a while back that we're bringing back to life, and hopefully it works.
Oh, okay. I heard something about it. I don't think I've had a chance to
Naturally.
check it out or use it or anything like that.
Um, Hopefully this works. This thing was killed and then resurrected a while back.
Mm-hmm.
So we're trying to rebuild it to get the UI updated and everything. And so some of the data is kind of mocked just so we could get back into it, but it should work. All right, that's fun. Okay. And naturally it didn't work. Dang it. Okay. Well, can you see the Jarvis sidebar over there though?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, okay. Dang it. Well, anyways, what it's supposed to do is go out and just find out all the information it can about Salto,
Okay.
and then display it in the sidebar. And then there's also going to be, well, here's the other version, like Alchemy is what this one's called. This is another Chrome extension that we're kind of like, we're trying to marry the two together is what we're trying to do. And so this went out and got, everything there was about Salto out there. Also, it hits a whole bunch of different data points. And so to your point on like the data warehouse and stuff, like a lot of this information is coming from various sources, such as like Crunchbase, the data warehouse, and kind of like everything. So I think the idea is for everything to be in Salesforce that needs to be in Salesforce, but also have a data warehouse backing a lot of information that probably, like, I don't think we need Crunchbase information in Salesforce.
Yep.
But data warehouse wise, and so like being able to have access to various pieces of information easily, I think, is the goal. If my terrible explanation did anything. But let me try to think of so I think like let me try this, like just type in a company that's not in there. So if we hit like a company that's not in Salesforce at all or in Sorcery, it allows you to like do a whole composition of like an email and everything. And usually there's a there's supposed to be a way to add this company to the Algolia index, which then introduces that whole flow of, okay, now I'm searching for a company, they're not in there, so now I can go out and search Crunchbase or like hit their Crunchbase information, then bring them back into Salesforce if we see them as being like a viable lead.
Got it.
I think that's the flow. That's at least my interpretation of the flow from all the conversation history.
So. Understood. Yeah, I think now, that this helps a lot because now a lot of these, the whole flow now, based on the, I guess, business requirement makes sense. Because that's why it just wasn't clear, I guess, where the data should be living, I guess, but to them, it doesn't, they want to search, do some kind of like a federated search across multiple systems.
Yeah,
and
I
then
think they want the appearance of data living in Salesforce,
Uh-huh.
but in reality, we put it where it needs to live. They just
Mhm.
access it through Salesforce.
Okay. So there is a concept, I guess, of kind of proxying data inside of Salesforce too. Um, but I don't know. I don't want to kind of complicate things. I just want to. It could be a different conversation, but um, okay, got it. Sorry, I'm just thinking out loud too while
Oh
I'm
no,
trying to
you're good.
digest all of this.
Just to let you know too, like
Uh-huh.
Josh, Johnny, and I, like we're all very easygoing, and so
Mhm.
you don't have to worry about stepping on our toes at all.
Uh-huh.
So, like
Cool.
Johnny said, I think you have more Salesforce experience than all of us combined. So, like
Mhm.
if you've got an idea on something and see something glaring that we're
Mhm.
doing wrong or can improve on, like yeah, just bring it up. No issues whatsoever.
No, no worries at all. I wanna. What I need to do is I kind of need to talk to we, I think, at one point, and then maybe like wider team. Again, I'm kind of being brand new in the whole environment. Like I've done a lot of stuff in the past, but I just don't also be stepping all over people's toes.
Oh yeah.
But uh, one, not even specific really to this. I think one kind of even more kind of structural part overall, not even with the DevOps, but more as far as using some of the for potentially like other best practices related to like maybe deploying some other Apex code overall across the org, not just. So I guess my question to him is really going to be more, where should I start focusing on? But I think here related to this, so I guess at what stage is this deployment right now? This the kind of search feature, because I see it's also in production. I'm wondering, is there anything else that's being built, or is it all pretty much deployed?
It's pretty much deployed.
Uh-huh.
So I'll show you kind of everything that we've got in there.
And then kind of second question to this is playing around in the sandbox and then also in the production. And I don't have access to full copy yet. I was wondering if, I guess, how are you guys, is everything connected or integrated to like the production environment where you're fetching or searching the data from external systems? Or do you have some kind of like a staging environment that's connected or mapped to like the full copy sandbox and then production to production?
So right now, anytime that we need to like, hopefully answer this correctly, anytime we need to work with data,
Mhm.
like overwrite anything or write new data, we always do it in sandbox. We dare not touch prod.
Yeah,
Um,
but I'm wondering, like from here, when you log in, so right now you're in the production org,
yeah.
but like when you log in into full copy and run a search, are you like querying the same server? Like that,
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. We
so
don't we
it's
don't have a
a staging
we don't have a
server.
staging server because we
Yeah.
haven't had to do any external writes
Hmm.
on there. So it's more so just like a read for pretty much every operation that we do from the Apex classes
Uh-huh.
on there. So it kind of just the benefit of having a staging and a production just wasn't really there for us at that point. And so
Understood.
I hope we get to that point. I mean, we're still very new to the Salesforce
No, understand.
development sphere.
Uh-huh.
And kind of one of the things that we're trying to do as well is like trying to figure out the best migration away from Sourcery over to kind of like our own implementation of it that like makes sense for all kind of use cases. And so like Sourcery uses a GraphQL API.
Hmm.
And so
Hmm.
we're trying to bring the good parts of that over to our own and be able to hook that. Like I think our goal is to be able to have GraphQI that can feed data from like a data warehouse or like from the Algolia indexes or really kind of any external data source, feed data out to various products that need to consume that data, such as like the Chrome extension or Slack or anything like that, and also provide another external source to Salesforce to pull from as well. So kind of like we have this like kind of like, I guess, layer that sits in front of the data warehouse that Salesforce could hit or anything else could hit, that could draw from Crunchbase, could draw from Clearbit, LinkedIn, like kind of all those various data sources and bring them into one. It's kind of like the end goal for that piece.
Yeah, I see. So the idea is like, I guess it's gonna be like the user experience is gonna be within Salesforce instead of having to navigate to like other sorcery link that's provided when you do a search.
Exactly.
And
yeah.
And then maybe tell the user what's the source of the data, because you can, I guess, for that type of architecture, you can use like you can proxy the data, and then obviously then user has an option to say, okay, I want to import this into Salesforce or not.
Yeah.
I see. Okay, I'm just trying to understand a little bit. Okay, got it.
So to me, it'd be nice if we could kind of wrangle our external data sources underneath kind of one umbrella. Because like this most recent interaction, this is hitting a service called SigParser.
Yeah.
And then the head count's hitting Matchpoint to grab data. And then of course the funding rounds down here is hitting Crunchbase. And so we've got just this kind of like wild west of all these just different calls that are going on that we could probably handle a little bit better. Because I mean, there's all kinds of like data massaging that goes on for the funding rounds to make sure it displays appropriately here. Same thing for the interaction. So it would be nice if all that could live underneath kind of one proxy server.
Yeah.
That allows interaction with those services, because then we could, because like right now we're making use of name credentials to kind of handle a lot of this data. And I feel like name credentials are sometimes kind of like they're a known unknown in that like, you need them, but you don't know you need them until something like you deploy something and it breaks. And so it'd be nice to get away from having, 10 different name credentials and having just one to access the backend that we're putting together, which would be a GraphQL backend.
Understood. Well, I think I can understand after you explaining a lot to me now. This is kind of like a more of a system architecture approach that I would take. Again, obviously this is just kind of speaking out loud and without knowing all the other systems that are in place. But what I've seen and experienced and sort of like worked on in the past was more of a system where Salesforce is more of a data client. So for example, you have a data warehouse where you're storing, 100 different data points about one contact. You wouldn't necessarily need all of that inside of Salesforce. You would kind of basically get it on demand as the user needs it. So for example, if there's multiple integrations here with SigParser, and then I forgot what's the second one related to headcount, you would, in the perfect world, I guess, have that, pull that information as within one sort of call, one payload from one external system, which will be like, Snowflake, maybe in the case of Excel. And then have that one single integration, and the data warehouse would run. I mean, there's different architectures you can use, like Kafka for streaming data, etc. Anyway, but the bottom line is like Salesforce would not necessarily, unless, for example, let's say in this, SigParser is not going to be a good case, but maybe let's say if we're looking at this headcount graph, and then basically that's just like kind of like in memory data, meaning like we're not storing that anywhere internally inside of Salesforce. So we want to maybe get the latest, whatever web service or information about this, whatever record, and the headcount of it. But we don't really care about that data necessarily living within our environment. but then again, like you can have a bunch of API calls coming out if you're always if you, people are just loading records all the time.
Mhm.
So I guess my question to you is the idea to get the data that will be displayed within this Lightning web component or web application within Salesforce gonna come from one source, or is it always gonna be coming from multiple sources? Like, will it be primarily sort of like persistent data, or do you know anything just about any of that?
I don't know about the data storage for like
Uh-huh.
headcount specific stuff.
Uh-huh.
I think our end goal is kind of like you said, like, Salesforce is not, it's weird, right? Like Salesforce needs to be perceived as like the source of record for a lot of this stuff, but like Salesforce doesn't make sense to store
Yeah,
interaction stuff in there because like
it's
it's not, it
not.
doesn't just doesn't make sense on that end. And so I
Yeah,
think you're right
it's
in that, like, it'd
it
be
becomes
nice to be able
also
to
like
say
expensive to store data in Salesforce eventually. It's a lot more
exactly, yeah.
expensive than other environments. So that's why you really want there just what you really need. You don't want to like just dump stuff and let it sit.
Exactly. And I think that's kind of where our head is at with like GraphQL
Uh-huh.
is it gives us that ability to ask for what we need, not just like, hey, give me everything that's coming from this endpoint.
Yeah.
It kind of can say like, okay, we want the interactions, we want the head count kind of in that graph query, and get back the information that we need instead of just everything.
Got it.
And I think, to your point, I think that GraphQL can pull from the various data warehouses and various external sources that we need. And I think too, like once we get, I think all the calls going to kind of one place, we can do cool stuff on the caching side. Like, funding rounds is not going to change all
Mm-hmm.
that much. Like, I mean, it's going to be fairly static most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so you could cache a lot of this type of information where it's an easy lookup to where you're not hitting Crunchbase for this, and maybe you're hitting Crunchbase,
Mm-hmm.
once a day or once a week even to update this stuff
Yeah.
on there. And so I think first goal is to get it to where we're not hitting three different, or on this page at least, three different APIs to bring in information.
Yeah. Yeah. I think and another kind of just point to that, which kind of where I mentioned some of the other like kind of structural design is, for example, one of the best practices is to have an integration layer within your basically Apex code. So that means is really that you have like one integration point. So then you're mapping like all your requests are going to be, so it's kind of like best practice of object-oriented programming too. So you basically have one sort of um, um, implementation of an Apex class that will be invoked every time there's some kind of like a request. So you're kind of like basically controlling, instead of having like multiple Apex classes making requests, consistently on its own, you're kind of like funneling it to one sort of entry point. And that way you're kind of controlling the order, and then at the same time, like you're also, it's like a best practice around basically like minimizing like API calls and like hitting different limits and things of that nature. So I don't know, I haven't really looked like how it's currently implemented, but that's something that would be also to consider in, for example, writing in this case like a Lightning web component that's going to have like a controller that's going to maybe make like requests to multiple like systems or multiple endpoints.
No, yeah,
But
that definitely makes sense. I think we're on that path. Like we have a
uh-huh.
few Apex classes. Some of them we couldn't mix together. So like there is like a SIG parser Apex class that just talks only to SIG parser stuff, and then there's also a Crunchbase
Uh-huh.
one that talks only to Crunchbase. We do actually, I think I lied to you earlier. I think headcount actually comes from our back end
Oh,
now.
does
We
it?
were able to
Okay.
bring that behind. So the back end that we have, the kind of the running name is Warhol.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have a Warhol Apex class that it's got a lot of methods in it, that we use to get data. And so I guess one question I have for you then on that is like, are you talking about kind of like I think Salesforce calls it boxcaring request, to where you're kind of
Yeah,
sending all the requests at one time?
yeah.
Okay.
I didn't know what they call that way, but yeah.
I think it's boxcaring. We ran into an
Yeah.
issue with it a couple months ago, but okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, no,
I'll
I mean, I think that sounds great.
yeah, I have I kind of worked on something similar not too long ago, so I'll open up my notebook and look through it again. Cool. All right, and then okay, so I think my kind of been thinking really today primarily into this whole like search feature, and now I think that's most of my questions for today. I think this helps me tremendously now understand actually the intent and also the, I guess, the architecture and implementation side of it.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. Are you on a sales Slack?
yeah, I am.
Okay, I should be available there too.
Uh-huh.
Sure. Well, I might not have all the permissions needed to direct message somebody, so you might have to direct message me. But
Oh, okay.
I've done some Slackbox stuff for we in the past, and so I've added to their Slack a while back, and so I'm just there as a guest.
Uh-huh.
I think you should be able to ping me directly in Slack right now until we get you set up in Basecamp.
Um, yeah, I think I was added to Basecamp yesterday.
Oh, perfect. Okay. Well, yeah, if you're in Basecamp, then yeah, no need to worry about Slack then.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I was just going to say in the meantime, if you're not in Slack and you have some questions, or not in Basecamp and you have some questions, I'm available there. But
Yeah, I was added yesterday. I actually I haven't used Basecamp before, so I didn't spend too much time on it yesterday. But yeah, now that I know that everyone's there, I'll be in there more often.
okay. Yeah, its chat implementation is a bit lacking to say the least, but it gets the job done. So
Got it.
it's a good project management tool overall, but the chat is it's a little slim.
Understood. No worries. Okay. Cool. Awesome. Well, then I'll have a bit of homework to do on my end. Obviously with everything to learn about the new environment.